Goedenavond, welkom bij RUW. Welkom bij het platform voor het publieke gesprek in Den Bosch. RUW is powered by Huis 73 en daar zitten we nu ook. Aan de Hinthamerstraat in Den Bosch, op nummer 73. Dat zit tussen 72 en 74 in, die twee gebouwen. En hier voeren we normaal gezien veel meer publieke gesprekken. En nu doen we dat dus zonder publiek. Daar hebben we voor gekozen in de nieuwe lockdown. En we komen nu via livestreams bij jullie en praten we over de onderwerpen die wij van belang vinden. We vinden het erg jammer dat we jullie niet meer hier kunnen uitnodigen. We hopen dat het goed met jullie gaat. Mijn naam is Ruud Geven en ik ben jullie host vanavond. Ik ga in gesprek met al onze gasten en we gaan het uitgebreid hebben over wat je hier op de achtergrond ziet. Dit is niet mijn brein, zo groot is het nou ook weer niet. En met RUW agenderen we allerlei onderwerpen, zoals klimaatverandering, racisme, 2 weken geleden nog, zorg, onderwijs, maar ook de bijzondere zaken die op ons afkomen op het gebied van technologie, zoals we eerder dit jaar al deden over kunstmatige intelligentie. En vanavond gaan we het wederom over technologie hebben. Maar nu over het brein en hoe we dat kunnen verbeteren. Misschien niet. En wat betekent verbetering dan? De titel van vanavond is Impossible Brains. De geüpgrade klasse aan de macht, vraagteken. Zelfverbetering met behulp van tools en technologie heeft de mens steeds naar een hoger plan getild, althans, denken we. En nu wetenschappers ook ons brein steeds meer doorgronden, is het mogelijk om deze van nieuwe, verbeterende snufjes te voorzien. Maar weten we eigenlijk genoeg van ons brein om in te schatten wat verbetering dan zou kunnen inhouden? Wat bedoelen we eigenlijk met verbetering? Wie kan zich het privilege veroorloven van breinverbetering? En wat voor effect heeft deze geüpgrade klasse op de rest van onze samenleving? We gaan erover in gesprek met kunstenaars en wetenschappers. En over waar de neurowetenschap staat, mogelijke toekomstscenario's en ethische dilemma's. Voordat we daarmee van start gaan, een huishoudelijke mededeling voor degenen die nu live meekijken en graag hun vragen kwijt willen. Dat kan in de live chat. We gaan ons best doen om ze te behandelen. Dat zullen we dan tegen het einde van het programma doen, ergens tussen 9 en half 10. Maar we kunnen het niet helemaal beloven, want we hebben een heel vol programma. Probeer het in elk geval. Waarom behandelen we uitgerekend nu vanavond dit onderwerp? Dat is op geen enkele manier toevallig. Op dit moment vindt namelijk een manifestatie plaats in Den Bosch, of eigenlijk had op grote schaal ook fysiek plaats moeten vinden in onze stad. Op allerlei locaties, namelijk Impossible Bodies. En nu vindt dat hoofdzakelijk digitaal plaats, net als dit gesprek. En daar sluiten wij graag op aan. We zijn uitgenodigd door Impossible Bodies om samen met ze dit programma te maken. En we hebben met de organisatie een aantal keuzes gemaakt voor dit programma. En we willen ook graag deze avond aftrappen met de directeur van Niet Normaal en de curator van Impossible Bodies, Ine Gevers. En zij is nu bij ons. Achter me zie je haar, maar ook nu in het scherm. Dag Ine Gevers, welkom. Kun je me horen?
Ja.
Hartstikke goed. Ine, jullie hadden een groot plan. En dat hebben jullie nog steeds. En dat vindt deze week plaats. Impossible Bodies, een manifestatie met allerlei tentoonstellingen op verschillende kunst- en cultuurplekken in Den Bosch. We konden langs de kunstacademie lopen. Er werd op de kop van, in ieder geval op de kop van het zand waren allerlei stukken te zien. En dat is niet doorgegaan. Klopt, hè? Wat is het nu?
Nou, we hebben vanaf de tweede dag van de eerste lockdown geanticipeerd op een mogelijk niet doorgaan van het fysieke deel. Dus wat Impossible Bodies heeft gedaan en het concept leent zich daar natuurlijk enorm voor. Aangezien het over cyborgs gaat en ook digital twins. We hebben 2 festivals voorbereid. En 1 festival fysiek gaat niet of bijna niet helemaal door. Want er zijn wel allemaal augmented reality routes in de stad. En ook in het innovatiegebied in Den Bosch. Dus we zitten nog steeds ook fysiek in Den Bosch. Maar het grote verhaal en het hele narratief en hoe de verschillende hoofdstukken met elkaar verbonden zijn, dat vinden bezoekers inderdaad op Impossible Bodies en dan in de Expo Experience. Wat een 3D-ruimtes zijn, eigenlijk allemaal wormholes waar we de kunstwerken zich in bevinden. Ja. En waar soms ook QR-codes aan verbonden zijn, zodat je een augmented reality in je huiskamer, net zo goed als op de straten naar Bos, tot leven kan brengen.
Ja, we zagen net heel even de voorpagina van jullie website met al die wormholes waar je naar verwijst. Hartstikke gaaf, want zoals je al zei, jullie hebben daar van het begin af aan op geanticipeerd en toen werd het opeens werkelijkheid. En nu is er zelfs een verblijfsruimte online. Je kan in een theater allerlei zaken volgen. Het is absoluut de moeite waard voor de mensen die nu kijken, dus ga dat ontdekken. Impossible Bodies, Ine, waar gaat het over? Wat was de aanleiding voor de manifestatie?
Zoals je weet, want dat heb ik ook destijds bij Ruw in een lezing ook aan de orde gebracht. Robot Love was de voorganger. En tijdens Robot Love hebben we toen ook dus de All-Inclusive Cyborg Catwalks georganiseerd. Daar was Jennifer Kanary trouwens ook een van de sprekers van. Er is een heel logische lijn als je nagaat als het gaat over de steeds meer dichter bij elkaar komen van robots en mensen of technologie en mensen. De cyborgs is de versmelting van mens en machine. Dat zijn we al een tijd aan het doen. Letterlijk hebben we ons psychologisch met ons brein daar ook totaal op voorbereid, aangezien als mensen gewoon met hun telefoon zitten te handelen, dan is het van ik ben niet ingeplucht of mijn batterij is leeg. Dus dat geeft eigenlijk al aan hoe zonder Impossible Bodies ook geen Impossible Brains zou kunnen zeggen. Zonder dat die voorbereiding, die psychologische voorbereiding, snap je, zouden we dit ook niet zo makkelijk kunnen doen. Dus eigenlijk Neil Harbison, die je net zag, dat is een van de...
Die hebben we nog niet gezien, maar die laten we nu even zien.
Oh, ik zag het
dit is de cyborg, ja?
Neil Harbison, hij heeft de openingslezing gedaan samen met Moon Ribus. En Neil is ook een cyborg in zijn paspoort. En hij vertelt ook hoe we steeds meer gaan samensmelten, maar dat die psychologische voorbereiding dus al lang plaats heeft gevonden. En hoe dat ook allerlei ethische aspecten met zich meebrengt, nog los van data-ethiek. Waar hij zelf natuurlijk ook mee te maken krijgt in de zin van dat hij ook gehackt kan worden. Je moet je dat voorstellen als, wij hebben nou te maken met een organisch virus, het COVID. Maar hij heeft natuurlijk ook met cybernetische virussen te maken, dubbelop. En daar vecht hij ook voor om voor alle cyborgs, de huidige en de toekomstige cyborgs, de rechten te zorgen dat daar rechten zijn. Zodat ze wat minder kwetsbaar zijn.
Ontzettend mooi. En er was volgens mij, jullie hebben nu ook een tour door de stad. Die zien we nu in beeld. Ja. Kun je ons daar nog iets meer over vertellen?
Ja, dus we hebben eigenlijk vanaf dag 2 van de vorige lockdown, toen het duidelijk werd dat we zeker een hybride festival zouden gaan krijgen. En misschien zelfs een vooral digitaal festival. Hebben wij met alle kunstenaars zijn we op zoek gegaan naar andere platforms. En van die kunstenaars heeft bijna de helft een augmented reality werk ontwikkeld. Dat is eigenlijk dus een nieuw platform waar ze hun werk kunnen laten zien. Dat kan je dus zowel met QR-codes op de straten in Den Bosch, dus inderdaad ook bij Huis 73... als op de Paaskerkhofweg met met name werken van studenten van de AKV Sint-Joost die gekoppeld aan het onderwerp, het thema, een werk hebben gemaakt. En dat zijn dezelfde werken die je ook via de QR-code vanuit de digitale Expo Experience in je huiskamer of wherever kan oproepen en tot leven kan brengen.
Ontzettend bedankt, Ine, dat jij hier nog heel even bij ons kon zijn vandaag. In ongetwijfeld een van de drukste weken van jouw jaar is. Wij gaan hier verder praten over cyborgs. En we wensen jullie heel veel succes met de manifestatie.
Ja, dag Jennifer en dag Antje. Ik zie jullie vast weer. Succes, dag.
Dag Ine. Over cyborgs gaan we het hebben vanavond. En dat begrip dat gaan we proberen uit te pakken aan de hand van een concreet voorbeeld van ons brein. Nou ja, een van de meest mysterieuze onderdelen van ons lichaam, denk ik nog. En we hopen daar wat meer licht op te schijnen vanavond. We proberen in ieder geval een aantal vragen grofweg te behandelen. Wat is dat brein nu eigenlijk en wat kunnen we er dan van verwachten als we daarmee gaan sleutelen? Kunnen we dat verbeteren? En wat betekent verbetering dan? Wat is dat voor een begrip? En wat kan het dan betekenen voor de samenleving als we mensen die hun breinen kunnen upgraden, zomaar deel laten nemen en iedereen onder dezelfde omstandigheden een voorsprong moeten laten vinden of krijgen? Nou goed, wat gaat er met onze samenleving gebeuren als we dat toe gaan laten op grote schaal? We gaan nu over naar al onze gasten vanavond. Dat zijn er 4 en die wil ik graag aan jullie gaan voorstellen. Als het goed is, hebben wij nu verbinding gemaakt met Nick Ramsey, aan mijn rechterzijde in elk geval, en Lily Frank. Hallo, welkom. Jullie zitten nu achter mij. En naast me zit Jennifer Kanary en Antye Guenther. Van harte welkom. Ik zou graag even willen beginnen met Nick Ramsey. Nick Ramsey, hoogleraar neurochirurgie aan het UMC in Utrecht. Dag Nick, fijn dat je erbij kan zijn. We hebben hier we hadden eigenlijk gehoopt dat we een schaalmodel vandaag van jou konden laten zien, maar we moeten het hiermee doen. Die komt van de Flying Tiger in de winkelstraat hier. Deze is niet zo anatomisch correct, denk ik, als waar jij regelmatig misschien niet zelf in snijdt. Dat weet ik eerlijk gezegd niet. Snijd je zelf in het menselijke brein, Nick?
Nee, ik ben geen neurochirurg. Ik ben neurowetenschapper, dus opleiding psychologie gehad. Maar ik ben er wel vaak bij op de operatiekamer wanneer de neurochirurg de weg moet vinden op de hersenen. Want ik ben vooral gespecialiseerd in het begrijpen van hersenfuncties en waar ze liggen in de hersenen.
Ja.
Vandaar. Een beetje de tom-tom van de hersenen.
Ja, en je onderzoek richt zich op geïmplanteerde elektroden in het brein. Ja. En je helpt verlamde patiënten met het besturen van apparaten, of in ieder geval dat mogelijk te maken. En ik begrijp ook dat je mensen met het fascinerende locked-in syndroom helpt.
Dat klopt, ja. Het is een beetje een lange weg geweest. Ik ben pas in 2005 begonnen met dit idee, want het hele brain-computer interface, dat is dan het uitlezen van hersenactiviteit, zodat die mensen iets kunnen besturen. Dat idee kwam in 2005 voor het eerst. Toen begon in Amerika ook een beetje op te komen. En inmiddels 2015 hebben we dan de eerste patiënt kunnen implanteren. En dat de filosofie was van voordat je werkelijk operaties gaat doen op het meest geheimzinnige en het meest waardevolle deel van je lichaam. Een discussie of je hart of je brein nou het meest waardevol is, maar we moesten toch wel zeker weten dat we ook iets konden bieden aan de mensen waar we mee gingen werken. En toen hebben we ervoor gekozen om locked-in syndroom te includeren, heet dat dan in een studie, om die te betrekken. Omdat we dachten van als we ook de signalen van de hersenen goed kunnen interpreteren, dan moet dat ook terugstromen naar de mensen die meedoen, zodat zij ermee kunnen communiceren. En mensen met locked-in syndroom, die kunnen niet of bijna niet communiceren, omdat ze hun spieren niet meer kunnen aansturen. En je kan het je heel makkelijk voorstellen, als je geen enkele spier kan bedienen, dat als niks meer reageert, ook je oogknippers niet, je tong niet, je kaken, dan ben je dus volledig overgeleverd aan je omgeving. Dan kan je geen enkel idee of gevoel meer kenbaar maken. En daarom heet het locked-in. Je bent mentaal gewoon intact, alleen de verbinding naar buiten toe is volledig verbroken.
Ja, we gaan daar dadelijk nog wat verder op in. Voor nu zou ik je graag de vraag willen stellen, zou jij iets aan je brein willen verbeteren? Nee, maar weet je, ik ben niet representatief
is representatief voor de toekomst. Ik denk dat het allemaal oké is. Ik denk ook dat het niet zo makkelijk te verbeteren is. Dat is nog een lange weg. Hoewel, ik zou wel, ja eigenlijk toch wel. Mijn geheugen zou ik toch wel graag een stukje beter willen hebben. Ik vergeet te veel.
Sorry, wat? Je geheugen zou je willen verbeteren? Volgens mij is Elon Musk daarmee bezig. Daar gaan we dadelijk nog heel eventjes bij langs. Maar wat je zojuist hebt beschreven klinkt een beetje als Elon Musk eat your heart out. Je bent echt in de frontlinie bezig, zeg maar, van wat er mogelijk is op dit gebied. En daar horen we dadelijk graag meer over. Dankjewel voor nu. We gaan heel even verder hier aan tafel. Namelijk rechts van me zit Jennifer Kanary. Kanary zeg ik, hè? Niet in het Engels Canary. Nee.
Ik ben in Canada geboren, dus officieel is het Canary, maar het maakt niet uit.
Oké. Ik hoop dat mensen je kunnen horen. Even zien, je bent kunstenaar, onderzoeker en mensen kunnen je online terugvinden als oprichter van Room for Thoughts. Room for Thoughts, wat doen jullie bij Room for Thoughts?
Ja, met Room for Thoughts ben ik gewoon als kunstenaar gewoon op zoek naar de fysische eigenschappen van gedachten. Als ik het zo mag zeggen, maar daar vertel ik zo dadelijk wel meer over.
Mm-hmm.
Ja.
Wat zou jij in je brein willen verbeteren?
Ja, ik zou eigenlijk wel lucid dreaming willen beheren. En ik heb het 1 of 2 keer meegemaakt en dat is zo fijn. Ik denk, als ik dat
Wat is dat?
Dat je wakker wordt terwijl je aan het dromen bent en dus met de kracht van je gedachten dingen kunt veranderen in je droom. En het voelt heel echt.
Gedachten veranderen in je droom?
Ja.
Oké.
Ja.
Daar moet je dadelijk nog eens even wat meer over vertellen, denk ik. Maar hoe dat dan precies in zijn werk gaat. Aan mijn andere zijde zit Antye Guenther. Je bent beeldend kunstenaar en ook jij doet onderzoek naar, vanuit heel verschillende achtergronden, thema's als biologische intelligentie, supercomputing, wetenschappelijke representaties van cognitieve processen en mind control. Ontzettend interessant. Hebben we het over echt heel concrete mind control, dat je echt de gedachten van iemand anders zou kunnen veranderen? Of?
My apologies, but I'm going to answer in English.
Ja, dat is fantastisch. Dat hebben we van tevoren besproken. Ja.
In my work, I'm very interested in how mind control softly over brain consciousness expansion actually got to mindfulness as a neoliberal tool. So in that sense, I am interested in MKUltra, for example, this secretive CIA program that was set up to find ways to control the minds during the Cold War.
Mm-hmm. En hoe functioneert dat nu, die mind control volgens jou?
Yeah, this is not really functioning well. That's the bottom line. They tried really a lot of also very horrific experiments with LSD, with a lot of other drugs, with sleep deprivement. The whole idea about the Manchurian candidate, is of course they were in fear that the Soviet Union was already able to switch the minds of people. Mm-hmm. But basically, all these experiments didn't came to a result that the CIA was really happy with.
Ja, en zou je dat ook kunnen zien als een vorm van breinverbetering?
If it's the question of what would I like... what is my approach to the idea of enhancement of the brain? I can totally understand how. There's a lot of things I wish things would function better. I would love to be always quick and sharp with answers that I only come up with hours later. But in
klinkt een beetje als het werk wat ik nu doe.
Conceptually, I'm actually against it, and I would agree with the neuroscientists that we should not try, but of course we are doing it. So.
Okay. Dankjewel. En ik stel jullie graag ook voor aan de vierde gast. Achter me zien jullie haar al, Lily Frank. Dag Lily, kun je me horen?
Hi.
Hi, ik kan jou nu ook uitstekend horen, hartstikke fijn. You are a philosopher and you teach at the Technical University in Eindhoven, the TU Eindhoven. You teach engineers about the role of technology in society. I think that's very interesting. Why do you think engineers should be taught these questions and these ideas about the role of technology in society?
For many reasons, but I think that one of the main ones and one of the main themes that we try to communicate to our students is the idea that technology is not a value-neutral tool. So sometimes in the United States, people will say something like, guns don't kill people, people kill people. And that's supposed to kind of embody this idea that the technology is merely a tool and everything else is has to do with how we use it. And I think that one of the key insights that young engineers need to understand is that technology itself can embody certain values. It kind of has built into it particular ways of relating to other people, particular ways of seeing the world, emphasis on certain things and de-emphasis on others. It can encourage certain kind of virtues and other kinds of vices. And these engineers are going to play a pivotal role in developing the technologies of the future. And so I think it's important that they are intentional about building the appropriate, or at least being mindful about the values that they are building into the technologies they help to create. Okay.
Is there anything, if it would be possible, what you would improve, what you would improve of your brain?
Oh my goodness, what wouldn't I want to improve? Yeah, I suppose that I would want to improve, I want to be able to reduce my biases, I think, especially my unconscious biases. So ways in which I'm not aware of judging other people, let's say, making snap decisions about other people, or discounting, say, the events that go far into the future, right, and prioritizing things that are happening in the much closer future. So I think that would be one thing that I would love to change, but also I would love to increase memory, intelligence, certain things that I think are relevant for moral decision making.
Yes, well, very interesting, particularly what you mentioned first, the biases. That's a real mind-boggling suggestion to start tinkering with that. Somehow we need those biases, perhaps. So how could we know what we were throwing away or reducing? So, very interesting, thank you. For now, Lily, we will be talking with you about all these aspects of brain improvement, or what we mean by that, later on. First, voor our viewers, schakel ik weer over op Nederlands. En Lily, ik hoop dat je me gedurende het gesprek verder ook kunt volgen. We gaan nu op stoom met de rest van met het programma, met de gesprekken met onze gasten. We gaan in de volgorde van eerst gaan we spreken met Nick Ramsey en daarna met Jennifer Kanary, daarna met Antye Guenther en daarna met Lily Frank. En daar zitten ook een aantal presentaties tussen en die gaan we nu naar kijken. We komen dan ook in die gesprekken terug bij de hoofdvragen die we vandaag willen behandelen. En dat komt aan het einde van het programma allemaal samen in één groot gesprek met z'n vieren. En hopelijk zelfs de mensen die aan het meekijken zijn. Maar nu willen we graag de avond even aftrappen met een kort filmpje over de ambities van Neuralink, dus opgericht door Elon Musk.
You're on vacation in a small village in France, but don't speak a word of French. Imagine if you could download a program into your brain and converse with locals. And what if you could later remember that trip in perfect detail?
In the future, you will be able to save and replay memories. I mean, this is obviously sounding increasingly like a Black Mirror episode.
Elon Musk says you will even be able to store your memories as a backup and then download them into a robot body. It sounds like science fiction, but Neuralink believes it could make that happen one day with this chip. It's a brain-machine interface, or BMI, a device that connects your brain to a computer. But before chasing these superhuman goals, Neuralink is focused on one thing: ending human suffering.
End all human suffering. Nou, dat is een heel mooie ambitie. Klinkt fantastisch. Misschien wel iets te fantastisch. We gaan naar aanleiding onder andere van dit fragment verder praten met Nick Ramsey. Dag Nick. Je zag dat fragment even. Ik zei net al, het werk dat jij doet klinkt een beetje als Elon Musk, eat your heart out. Want jij bent dit ook echt. Jij bent echt op mensen aan het testen met die interfaces, als ik het goed begrijp.
Ja, het is hetzelfde vakgebied. Ze zijn al een paar jaar bezig. Ik ken een klein beetje, het is heel geheimzinnig. Het is een klein beetje, het valt buiten de academische wetenschappelijke kring voor BCI, Brain-Computer Interface. Maar I think I'll switch to English to be a little bit more inclusive for the other people. But it's he has his original idea to do this was his worry about artificial intelligence, and he was worried that we would be left out as people because we are not as connected as computers are, and that a lot of computers together can overpower people. I think that's a fear. So he wants a very broadband, a very high capacity connection directly between the brain and computers. And it's a very vague idea, and he found neuroscientists who feed this idea that it should be possible. But nobody is sure whether it is possible. So his goal was to get thousands, preferably maybe 1 million connections with cells in the brain. And the brain has about 100 billion cells, so it's still 1 million is small. And having so many little connections that you would be able to feed information into the brain that is much more dense and intense than what you can process with your eyes or your ears. And that you can feed information back into the computer. So, being an engineer, he decided that the first challenge would be to build a device that will do this. And what he showed very quickly in the movie is a very small disk where all the electronics are inside to record from, I think, about 3,000 or 10,000 little electrodes. Each electrode is a tiny wire that has a connection with the cells in your brain. And the cells in your brain talk to each other with electricity. And if you put a little wire there, you could basically listen in to what the cells are communicating, although we don't understand the language of the cells. And that's what came out a couple of months ago, is he showed his company, or Neuralink, was capable to build something that is probably 1,000 times smaller than what we have available in academia. And he built a big machine to put these little wires exactly in the outside surface of your brain. So for us, you reach basically maybe 0.01% of the brain, but that is his start. So there's a lot of things he has not thought of or he's not saying, and there's a little bit of a discussion in the world of the brain-computer interface about where it's going, but so far the biggest problem has not been touched, and that is to understand how to interact with the brain. You can put wires in there, but that doesn't solve that problem. So that's the big challenge. But I'm not very critical about it. I would love to have one of those machines if it turns out that they're safe for people, because when you start working with people, you're going to leave it in there for the rest of their lives. So it has to be safe, and it has to be very robust, so it doesn't break and you have to do another surgery.
And Nick Ramsey, do I understand correctly that there's no information going in via this interface that you are using. There's no
Correct.
interaction,
Yeah.
as you put it.
Yes. Correct.
Why would you want that?
Well, so the first brain implants were stimulating, and if you know they're called deep brain stimulation devices, and the reason for that was that people with severe diseases like Parkinson, that was the first, or with severe tremor of your limbs, that somehow part of your brain got damaged, and the brain consists of balancing systems, we call them circuits or closed loops. And your brain is extremely active even if you sleep. Even if you're under narcosis, your brain is incredibly active. And if there is, you know, to be able to maintain thoughts, to be able to interact with the world and survive for 80, 90 years, your brain has to be kept in a balance. So there's a lot of, you know, push, pull, feed forward, feed backward. There's a lot of systems that keep each other in balance. And if you break one part of the system, like in Parkinson's, a part of the brain dies, you get all kinds of strange problems, like neurological. People with Parkinson's, they cannot walk very well, and they get these tremors. And basically by accident, they found out that if you put some electrical pulses in a particular part of the brain, that somehow you restore this balance.
Okay.
And that's why it worked so well. So
Right.
that's for disease.
Right.
Now for, if you wanted for Elon Musk ones interacting with the brain, then you will also have to stimulate on the same wires that you listen to the brain from.
Okay, and you also had some. You have a presentation for us that we can that we can watch briefly. I think we can put that on screen right now. It's in Dutch, and we turned to English. Well, that's fine. Nick, lead us through it.
Yeah, so I think there's one or two slides missing in the beginning. Maybe, can you go back, or is that not possible? Yes, so what I want to talk about is how we connect brains to computers. And I also want to acknowledge the UNP team. The program in Utrecht is Utrecht Neuroprosthesis. And what I'm talking about is not just my story. It's a team of 15 people plus another 30, 40 people involved in the surgery and everything. So this is really teamwork. But I get the opportunity to talk about it. So in the next slide, I basically, say the reason to do this kind of work is that we are hoping to solve some of the severe brain problems. And the brain problems worldwide are a big problem, and that includes psychiatric, like depression or alcoholism. It includes all the neurological disorders, brain stroke, hersenbloeding. And a lot of years we've been hoping that medications would help, and they've been not as effective as we have thought, and it will take much longer. I think that's the best way to say it. And then came the development in electronics, and I think everybody contributed to that by buying mobile phones. I think that's the fastest development. People buying phones, they provide technical industry with enough funds to make things very small. And if you can make things very small, you can start thinking about putting them inside human bodies and making them do things. So we thought about how to test this interaction with the brain, and we decided to work with people with locked-in syndrome. Like I said at the beginning of the program, these are the only people that we think can benefit from what we develop right now. And then as we get better, then we can start helping people with less severe diseases. Now, locked-in syndrome is very rare. We think in Holland there's maybe 150, 200 people that have it. It's essentially you lose all the connections to your muscles, but your brain is completely intact. You won't be able to talk or communicate, and your mind is intact, so you're essentially locked in. And most of the people that have it are people with ALS, because that's the disease makes all the connections stop. But there's also people with the brainstem bleeding, stroke, or with car accident trauma. But by far the most are the motor neuron disease. So then in the next slide, I show that these people have, contrary to what everybody thinks, have a very decent quality of life. We think if you see someone who's locked in, it's a 24-hour care at home, you sit in a chair, lie in a bed, you can't do anything, you have to ask for attention all the time. Most of these people will use, some assistive technology, but once their muscles get worse, they won't be able to do that, and they have to wait for someone to come by and ask them what they want. And the way they communicate is they can blink with their eyes. That's the last thing that you can do. And you can choose letters if the person that is standing next to you has a letter card and points at the letters, and the letter that you want to choose, you blink your eye. It's very slow and it's highly dependent. Now, people with locked-in syndrome they score their quality of life somewhere around 7 out of 10. And I think the average in Holland is somewhere between 7 and 8 for, abled, healthy people. So it's not bad at all. But what is important there is that they can communicate with their family and friends, and that there's some independence. And that's where the brain-computer interface comes in. That allows you, when you're locked in, it allows you to control a computer by manipulating your brain activity. And then you can actually, operate a computer. You can do things without needing other people to help you. So brain-computer interface is for communication, but if it gets better, you can also control like a wheelchair. And what we want in the BCI field is that at some point you'll be able to rewire the neurons, your spine basically, rewire it so you can control your arms and legs again, and so you can walk and do things. And that's future music. Maybe in 100 years or so we will be that good, but you have to go by step. So what we succeeded in now is simply a brain click. It's like a mouse click, but it's a brain click, and you make the click by trying to move the fingers of your hand. When you try to move them, your brain will start giving that electric pulse that normally goes to your arm, but the connection is broken, but the pulse is still made. So instead of your arm, we pick up that electricity directly from the brain with a very small disc. And that disc lies on top of your brain, underneath your skull, and it picks up the electricity. The electricity goes up when you try to move your fingers. And then we have a computer that recognizes that and said, okay, you want to make a click, and then that becomes a click in a program. And this way you can spell very much like you can spell with a mouse on a computer. It's slower because you can't move the mouse, but you have to wait for the computer to highlight one item after another. And that allows you to click through. Now, the first patient or first person that we included is 5 years ago. Her name is Hanneke. She's been in the news in 2016 a lot. She's actually from Den Bosch. She was completely locked in. She got an implant. You can see it a little bit here. And then we trained every week with her to learn to control that signal and control a computer. She lives at home 24/7 care by family. She has very nice children and a husband that took care of her, plus another 15 people that you need to maintain this. Now, the last slide that I ran out of time, I guess. I talk a lot, but it just shows that this is the first person and the only person in the world now that actually uses the system, with the implant, almost 24/7. We succeeded a couple of months ago in making it work as a night watch, so that she can wake up the system when she wants to in the middle of the night, which was not possible before that. And she uses it to interact with her caregivers and everything. And we just replaced the device because the battery was going to go low, and we have another 5 years, hopefully, that we can work with her to make it work even better than what it does now. So,
thank you. Yes, thank you, Nick Ramsey, for this interesting, little peek into your research. You're obviously helping people with your research and the technology that you are developing. Do you ever worry that, someone like Elon Musk uses a strategy to start with technology to help people and then perhaps transforms that technology to another use, as you said, getting input into the brain and changing our thoughts, changing our brain, so that your implants could be used to develop that technology. Do you ever worry about that?
no.
No?
I think, no, it's very straightforward. I have to say, I'm in a luxury position that we work with people, and we work with people who benefit, who are severely, impaired. That makes it easy for me to say, well, it makes sense to do this. The thing, when you think about potential use in healthy people for enhancement and everything, for one, we still have not even scraped the surface of the problem of trying to put information in the brain. We know a little bit. If you stimulate part of the brain, you might hear something, or you might see a white flash, or you might feel a tingling. But that's extremely far away from implanting thoughts. And we don't have any idea where to put those electrodes. So, for the next 3 generations, that's not going to happen. But I also like to say that the big worry about these things, we have been manipulating our brains for hundreds of years. And now, we manipulate our brain with chemicals a lot. Right. We drink wine to relax. We smoke to, concentrate. We use all kinds of medications and drugs that influence how we think. If you're thinking about medication for depression, that we influence our emotional household, we influence how our brain operates. So this is not suddenly a huge, big step.
Okay. Thanks for now, Nick Ramsey. We're going to shift to our next guest, Jennifer Kanary. Welcome. I already welcomed you, but welcome again. Do you want to continue in English? That's fine. Okay. Jennifer, the first thought that comes to mind when I see your work is psychosis, but that's not because of the quality of your work. That has to do with your subject. You work on the subject of psychosis, and you've done so for quite some time now.
Yes.
And it has a very personal starting point.
Yes.
Your sister-in-law committed suicide as a result of a psychosis.
She died by suicide in a state of psychosis.
Right.
And after her death, I realized, even though I looked it up what it was, that I didn't know what it was. It were just words, a wall of words. It was still a black box. What is a hallucination? What is a delusion? It didn't tell me anything about her experiences. So I started a journey, and I'm 14 years into that journey. And I have done a thesis on how to simulate psychosis with media.
Right, a simulation of psychosis.
Well, the subjective experiences of psychosis.
That's a very important remark, because we've been talking about the scientific perspective that often starts from the outside, although I can imagine that in Nick Ramsey's case also the subjective experience is very important in his advances. We've invited you because we wanted to include exactly that perspective, the subjective experience of the brain, and how that could shed light on our questions this evening. You also brought a presentation. Please show us what you work on. I think it's going to be broadcast it now, exactly. Room for thoughts.
Okay, so it's going by itself. So when I was little, I was told that I think too much all the time. So I started to wonder, as an artist, what does it mean to think too much? And it led to trying to understand what is a thought? What is dangerous about a thought? Why are people telling me this all the time? And that started a journey into understanding the physics of thought. What does a thought look like? What is a thought if I doodle? It's a thoughtless process, but yet something is being communicated. So I started out with fashion, thinking, okay, what if I wear my doodles on my skin? Will I be communicating with myself? Those kind of questions I was asking myself. And that led to other questions. How is a thought born? And making installations that represented for me how a thought is like a seedling and then grows. Questions like, how can a thought become so powerful that it actually can destroy the body that actually generates it? So it will, if you take your own life or you self-mutilate, what kind of a thought is behind that and causes that? And can you change that? What is the power of a repeated thought? I'm a good girl. Or what is an original thought? Do original thoughts still exist? And I tap into a surrealistic state of mind, and the words flow, like opera candy is a far cry from hellbound giggles of the future. Have those words ever been together before, and is that an original thought in all of humanity? What is the weight of that? What is an artificial thought? Do androids dream of electric sheep kind of inspiration? What is a crazy thought? I had this crazy notion that one day my work will inspire the one that gives emotion to artificial intelligence. Whoa, where did that come from? Is it good or bad? What is a thought disorder, and what is a confused thought? And that led me to that research in combination with my sister-in-law leaving this life. She had the label or the diagnosis of schizophrenia, with a kind of form of chronic psychosis. And that brought me on that journey. And I can show a little bit of that journey. I believe I brought a video. I don't know. But in that journey, you enter the mind of a girl named Jamie, and it's like you are able to walk into her mind. And I think they'll have the video. Do I need to press start? Okay. So this is going to be a summary of my...
Please start the video.
14-year journey in understanding the subjective experiences of psychosis. And this video is sometimes naughty. It doesn't want to play all the time.
Apparently.
It's as if some artificial intelligence likes to steer it or something.
Well.
That's the imagination.
Let's continue with that. Yeah,
let's continue with that. Yeah. I don't know if I have control still. So basically, one of my inspirations for understanding psychosis is from Eleanor Longman. She said that a vital first step was learning to separate metaphorical meaning from what I previously interpreted to be a literal truth. So for example, voices which threatened to attack my home, I learned to interpret as my own sense of fear and security in the world rather than an actual objective danger. So there's something about psychosis that you go into this world of a waking dream state and you experience metaphorical thoughts as real realities. And if you can separate the literal from the metaphorical, you actually have more control about your experiences. And she says that psychosis is a sane reaction to insane circumstances. In fact, the psychic phenomenon is a creative and ingenious survival strategy that should be seen not as an abstract symptom of illness to be endured, but as a complex, significant, and meaningful experience to be explored. So that is the field where I've been working in and trying to understand psychosis as beneficial. We just don't know how to use it. It's like this super raw power of the imagination that is able to create your associations as real realities, at least part of the subjective experiences, and you react to that as if it's really real. So that's wonderful power of the brain. So I'm wondering, as an artist, what if we stop looking at psychosis as a broken brain, because that's the model that we kind of use right now, to a psychosis that is, if you listen to people with experiences, it can be a spiritual transformation or a gift to connect with ancestors, or it's even seen as the birth of a new shaman, a new healer. And I'm just really curious why all those narratives and all those different narratives happened in the world, and is there kind of a source story that can tell us something about the brain and how it works by looking at all the stories. So that's the work I do as an artist. And then as a challenge question for tonight, to put it out there, I'm just curious, what if with technological implants we could actually steer the artificial value of psychosis, so we could control that value. So now it's like a raw superpower. What happens if we could actually turn on the hypersensitivity or the hyposensitivity of the brain and change how we experience colors, and if we have control over that, what would we be able to do? And yeah.
Thank you.
That's about it.
What kind of transformation do you mean? What would you suggest?
The transformation that I understand psychosis to be is somehow a deep reset of the story in your body, mind, heart, or soul that is not working. And it needs a new story. So it's the opportunity to change that story chemically, physically, mentally, but if you don't know you have that power or going through that, yeah, it can become a living, waking nightmare. So I think it explains why some people experience psychosis as this wonderful, brilliant experience, and other people as this pure nightmare experience.
Okay, yes, we're trying to get the video online still, so perhaps you can view it in a few minutes. For now, when I first read your intentions, I was slightly shocked, I have to say, to turn something that is experienced as true horror, the breaking up of reality and the panic that goes along with that, into something usable and in something transformative of your personality, or perhaps we can use it as a technological tool to create fantastic psychoscapes, or I don't know what you exactly have in mind, but that was what my imagination was doing with your proposition. So I was wondering, how do people react to your proposal?
Until now, I can't summarize it right now because I wrote a whole theory about this. But most people with experience of psychosis says you understand psychosis. So I'm getting a lot of wonderful feedback for understanding how the senses change.
Why do they say that?
They say that, I don't know, all I know is that there's been a lot of research about psychosis, but very little about the subjective experiences. So what I did for my thesis is just study stories of people and find the patterns in those stories, and then use those patterns as design principles for the technology. And suddenly it became a huge success, this simulation. They say, you understand psychosis. And I'm like, what's going on here? So I've been trying to study what I learned and what an artistic approach can actually tell us. And in this, I follow a neuroscientist called Semir Zeki, who says the artist is an intuitive neuroscientist. And I find that theory very useful to support my claims.
Nick Ramsey, you want to respond to that?
Yes and no. I'm not going to negate this. I mean, I've done research in psychiatry for 10 years, and of course, people with psychosis come in and they have a reason to get to the hospital, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that don't need to go to the hospital. But I do respect this. But I'm always thinking in terms of what how can we help people with that? And the general idea is if you would be able to have a very professional person help 24/7 a person with a mental problem or a mental disorder, you would get pretty well and fairly far. But we just don't have that kind of capacity, and that's why we have to resort to medicine. Or basically medicine is the only therapy that is very, how do you call that, work efficient. You give medicine and you don't have to spend. But it's part of our society. It's, I do believe that there's some truth to psychosis being some kind of a manifestation of what we're made of. But I'm not sure. Again, I'm thinking more on the illness side. I'm not sure that it will help a lot of people overcome psychosis if they experience it as something intrusive and negative. Mm-hmm. Maybe that makes the difference a bit. And otherwise, I think all the mental disorders or the psychiatric disorders, they're all on a spectrum, and the people that end up being incapacitated by it end up with way too much of that particular phenomenon or feature or whatever it is. Well, a lot of other people will experience it in very little and very small quantities that you can handle. And maybe if you totally eliminate this, people say with genetics you can get very far. You can avoid having babies that will turn out with a severe schizophrenia. But maybe we lose other things, like artist capabilities.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Thank you.
It's broad.
Thank you. Jennifer, you want to
I
respond?
think Lily wants to respond.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Lily. Yes?
Can I jump in? Jennifer, thanks. It's really fascinating what you had to say. I was wondering if you feel a kinship in your work with other disability theorists. For example, people who argue that, deafness is not the problem. It's the society that's built to only, it's a society set up for hearing people. That's the problem. Or autism spectrum disorder is a form of neurodivergence, not something that needs to be cured. And it sounds a little bit like you're saying that schizophrenia or forms of psychosis could be on that same kind of spectrum.
Yeah, well, I think one thing we're forgetting is that we do have technology already, and that's storytelling. And storytelling is everything in how we experience a reality. And you can manipulate the brain with storytelling through music, through images, through words. And the biggest issue that I've had with the history of psychosis and how we've dealt with it is indeed the storytelling. So either it was immoral beast or broken brain or bad blood, but never did people listen to what people with experience of it actually say. And it really is an experience of being closer to reality, seeing through reality, seeing the connections and being thin-skinned, hitting you much harder. And it's much more poetic. After 14 years of studying these experiences, it can be very poetic and beautiful and feel connected to everything, but it can also overwhelm you. So the color white can inspire you completely, but it can also become your worst nightmare because it's everywhere. So it's about understanding how that transformation of storytelling happens in the brain, and the very human need for the metaphorical explanation of literal things that you experience. So it's a play between those two worlds. I could talk for a long time about this.
Yes, we shouldn't.
No.
Although I would want to.
So yes, in answer to your question, yes, I recognize that because it's the storytelling of society that is considered the most harmful in many cases. And that's tragic.
Okay, we finally do have your short movie. So what are we going to see? We're going to see the experience of psychosis.
Well, you're going to see the brief history of my artistic research in 1 minute. So.
Okay.
I've never known what it means.
It's coming, really, we promise.
In other ways, we add a link later to the live stream, maybe.
Well, what we should discuss before we see the movie and go to Antye Guenther, I think, is this idea of brain improvement. That, to you, is an empty concept.
Yeah, what's improvement? Because that's just a philosophical idea. It's different in every perspective of every different individual. But what I do think that we can have control over in our brain is maybe the intensity of our senses. So maybe we can diminish our senses or enhance the intensity of our senses, and that can change already how we experience reality, and in particular, when you spread the 5 senses to senses like proprioception and time and space and temperature, and then even the sense of the other or of society and pattern. So yeah, that's...
Okay. We're now actually going to watch the short movie.
Yes.
I've never known what it means because I've never been close to him, so I've never known what psychosis means and what it is. Should have maybe found out, but because I don't have a good relationship with him, then I just...
Dit doe ik nooit weer.
For this experiment, we will be linking your mind to the mind of a girl named Jamie. Jamie is currently located at the nearby hospital. By meandering into the labyrinth of her experiences, you will be making a valuable contribution to her recovery.
Is that color? What is happening? I have the power of color.
Difficult to know when it's reality and when it's not. So
Okay.
I've never known what it
Restart.
That gave us a short impression of what you create, what sort of visions you confront people with. They say that they have a problem of distinguishing reality from not reality. How does that translate to the real experience of psychosis? How do you know that that is the experience of psychosis?
Well, I literally just take quotes from a lot of people,
Right.
and about 33 of them I managed to put in this simulation, and between that I started to find patterns. So it's really literally about changing your experience of colors, or changing your experience of sound first, and then the story that you create because of that, but also trying to deal with those realities happening at the same time. That's the hardest part, to look at you and have a conversation and then see that your eyes are suddenly turning really dark and very deep, or changing in time and space, and it looks like you're looking at me longer, and that is unsettling. So that's how psychosis can begin, and then it takes you down a rabbit hole, and then you get stuck, and then it becomes nightmare. But you can recognize the early transformations of the senses and what it does to you, yeah. And to feel that, police officers or prison workers, they understand, why somebody doesn't react, or why somebody says strange things, because within 10 minutes, with those design principles, everybody looks like really, really like they're in psychosis, and that's why this thing that I created is so impactful right now. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you for now. We are going to continue with Jennifer.
Antje.
Antye Guenther. Antye Guenther.
Yeah.
Antje, you've worked on the brain, as you already told us before. You were fascinated by this object, by the way. It's been. You can have this one. You can take it home if you want to.
Oh my goodness.
And you were asking yourself, this seems to be a spaarpot in Dutch, money collector. Who's going to put money in it? That's the question. That's what you told me when you saw this. What do you meant by that? Who's going to put money in the brain?
No, I just was fascinated by it as an object. I mean, I'm somehow collecting these weird visualizations or concepts of the brain. So this brain is empty. And it, in the fissure, of the brain, there is a slit, and you're supposed to stuff something in it. And somehow, of course, it reminds me of mind control and the idea of the brain as a vessel, which I'm also dealing with. So, and then... it has kind of a horror effect, the idea of you put money into the cavity of the brain. So that, there is something weird going on, I think.
Somebody's going to make money of this.
Yeah, somehow.
Okay.
Already made, because you bought it.
Exactly. Antje, you also brought a sizable presentation that you're going to walk us through on what you work on.
Can you give him
that one? Thank you. Because you've been working on brain alteration.
Yes, I thought, like, as a visual artist, would be best to just give you an overview of how I, as an artist, work with the theme of brain alteration. And I'm trying to overload your brain circuitries with some images. So the first work, prosthesis, simulation kit of externalized human brain tissue. Within this work, I unfolded the narrative of a South Korean research team that successfully experimented with proliferating human brain matter, and because there's no space in the head, this brain tissue gets externalized, because it is a hallmark then of amplified brain performance. It becomes a status symbol, and because of this, the high fashion industry will target the brain lump and start producing protection cases and brain tissue jewelry, among other accessories. So that is a narrative that gets unfolded within specific exhibition setups and within performative lectures, where I'm demonstrating basically this simulation kit. The next work, the upload. For this work, my brain was scanned, and afterwards we animated the diffusion MRI brain data together with a 3D computer expert, using the scientific data we were giving, as well as the images and the original color coding. And I finalized this work last year by developing a meditative hypnotic voiceover that was embedded into specific brain entrainment sound frequencies. These sound frequencies are meant to synchronize the brain waves in a specific rhythms in relation to these frequencies. And this all resulted in a fictionalized, tongue-in-cheek video tutorial on cognitive enhancement. So the animated visualization of the brain is spinning and spinning, while a meditative voice invites the viewer to follow these rotations, to relax into these mesmerizing brain bodies, and to fully immerse into a unique mindful experience. And as part of this hypnotic text layer, the listener will also will also learn about the method brain self-observation that allegedly was originally developed by the US American intelligence agencies to influence and control the brain and thought activities. In 2018-19, I conducted a project together with neuroscientist Alexander Sack and his research team in Maastricht around brain stimulation, so another also scientific method to influence the brain. As part of the project, I was again a test person in a brain stimulation experiment, and the brain data I processed afterwards in a scientific visualization software to develop what I call a speculative prop called Brainwaves. This project dealt with different images, imaginaries, and problematic conceptualizations we have of the brain and how it's in its workings. And I focused on two brain metaphors in particular. The brain as the vessel, so I took this literally and made a brain container or a brain vase out of it. This is also, of course, linked to the whole idea of mind upload. And brain activity as sparked electricity that is lightening up. So these brain vases are also brain lamps. And these objects became then performative objects in the performance 2019 Maastricht Transformational Supernode Gathering of Intelligent Minds. No body, never mind how to beautify your brain data and use it to unleash your full potential. In the performance, I attributed a lot of different functions to the brain vases, so porcelain brain vases as revolutionary ways of scientific data visualization. as a promising, innovative tool for cognitive enhancement, as exquisite and sophisticated objects for decorating homes and offices, and as archaeological remains of historic scientific data visualization practices in a society that suffered from past events of total digital data annihilation. Okay, that's maybe a bit long. Okay. The brain races were also a key element in the solo show I presented in Rotterdam this year. And I would like to quote from the invitation text. Welcome to the temporal headquarters of the Institute for Cognitive Prosperity and the first showcase of our services in Rotterdam. The Institute for Cognitive Prosperity is a visionary think tank that seeks to elevate the human mind for advanced mental flourishing and universal cognitive efficiency by raising awareness to the great benefits of brain alteration, creating enhancing environments and unique transformative experiences. Our vision is one of a blossoming and prosperous world where enlightened citizens at the peak of their cognitive performance are able to unleash their full potential for personal growth and global healing. So in preparation of this exhibition, I was following an online course, how to set up a think tank, and for this I also had to write a mission and vision statement. The exhibition reflects in reference to Cold War think tanks. So that is, this work is called The Artist in Uniform, so that's me. The show, the exhibition reflects on how problematic conceptualizations of the brains reinforce and feed into the neoliberal desires for cognitive enhancement, self-optimization, and self-control. I modified the whole space in different ways. I used light, sound, the brain. You see the brain lamp here. I invented specific scents that were supposed to change, for example, the memory capacity, etc. The tile work, electricity favors the. Oops, sorry. It's got on my technology. No, it's actually me. Was also part of the show, but I will need to skip this here due to the time limit. I want to conclude with this work, Neocortex, which is another piece that used the MRI brain data I got from the neuroscientists in Maastricht. This work refers to this upcoming trend I saw in scientific research practices to print posters on textile, so you can just easily iron them flat in different conference locations. The Neocortex, this work is a textile research poster publication that is also a silk scarf, so it has an ISBN number but can be purchased as a fashion item. And this work tests, within this work I wanted to test aspects of textile between 2 and 3D in reference also to MRI brain imaging. This scarf is then also presented within a showcase performance where the various applications of the scarves are demonstrated for optimal results. So the idea is on the brain scarf there is my brain structure, and you basically wrap my brain around your brain, and if you do it in a specific way it has some positive effects. Mm-hmm. So that was maybe in short what I wanted to contribute to the discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, because you imply that talking about brain alteration, that is a result of the way we, as a larger culture, have adopted a neoliberal vision of how we wish to conduct our matters. Could you Could you unpack that a little bit?
I think it's rather that within tech capitalism or within this neoliberal thinking, all these kind of things are taken in. So, for example, I mean, mindfulness as a practice is existing for a long time and has a specific religious or like historic embedment. But then in how we are use it now, for example, in the Western world, is very limited and very focused then on productivity, on how to make you fit again to deal with the demands, basically, of the work, of the work environment or your personal space. So if you don't feel fit enough, it's on you to then visit another retreat or just do a little bit more mindfulness. That's in short the problem, I think.
Brain alteration as a utility for more productivity.
Yes, definitely. I mean, that's also when one looks, for example, at the history of LSD, right? Like LSD was at the very beginning used, for example, in these CIA experiments for mind control. At the same time, it was then used in these youth cultures for consciousness expansion, but is now used in form of microdosing a lot in the Silicon Valley as a way to increase creativity and brain performance sharpness, but for your work. Like
microdosing being using drugs on a very
low level, so you've basically functioned completely, but it is said that it's increasing your creativity and your productivity for your work.
Right. So the brain alterations that we are already using. Right. Okay, thank you. We're a bit, under time pressure. We're going to go to Lily Frank. Hi, Lily. Can you hear me? I can't hear you yet.
Yes, can you hear
Hi.
me? Yeah.
Lily, you've been listening to Nick Ramsey, to Jennifer Kanary, to Antye Guenther. What are your thoughts on what we've discussed until now?
Oh, I mean, that's a bit overwhelming. All been really fascinating, but I think one of the themes, perhaps that has come up a few times, has to do with access to these technologies for brain enhancement, as well as ways in which these technologies can either increase equality, like promote equality and human quality of life and flourishing, or they could increase inequality and make our lives worse in a variety of ways. And of course, some of this is going to be subjective. We're going to disagree about what counts as an improvement, right? That's an inherently normative question.
Right.
But especially, I think, in Antye and Jennifer's presentations, there seemed to be the theme of power and who gets to decide what counts as an improvement, or what's a better brain, or a better way of living. That seemed to reoccur a lot. And that's something certainly that comes up a lot in ethical discussions of neuroenhancement, right? And sometimes in very basic ways, like who will have access to brain enhancements, maybe 3 generations in the future when they actually exist. As Nick pointed out, we're a long way from actually getting to the point where we can have meaningful inputs into the brain. But in the future, will that be something that's only accessible to the rich and already privileged? Or can it potentially be a tool for creating greater equality? So say undoing kinds of like inequalities that result from the genetic lottery, for example.
You are working in Eindhoven, which is, let's say, which hosts one of the technical universities in the Netherlands, and what we've been hearing, and that's also the reason that we've planned this program, is that the narratives on brain improvement have already become well, lined up with the logic that Antje just told us more about, the tendency to make the brain more productive, more usable to our current demands. Do you think that Eindhoven will be able to resist this narrative and using this idea of brain alteration to their, to their advantage?
I hope so. I don't think I can really speak for Eindhoven. But I think that the idea of quality of life and human flourishing plays a really big role at a university, and at least in the philosophy and ethics department, something we think about a lot and talk about a lot. So the demands of the market are not the only, maybe not even one of the things that should be directing the ways in which we change ourselves and change ourselves through the development of new neurotechnologies. These decisions should be guided through processes like democratic deliberation and ethical reflection and stakeholder engagement, to figure out, what kind of people do we actually want to become, right? Because these are going to have profound changes on us,
right?
Potentially in ways we don't even foresee.
Right. So the interesting question is then, if we actually take the steps to developing these technologies, what kind of processes should we create? How should we involve citizens in thinking about the development of these technologies?
So I think it really depends very much on the technology. I think, programs like this exactly are a starting point. So people need to know what the possibilities are, what the scientific possibilities are, and to have the kind of like creative, imaginative space that artists provide. So I think there are different kinds of methodologies that are in place in engineering that are potentially useful. There's a process called value-sensitive design, for example, which is created in human-computer interaction, but which is spread to different domains within engineering, in which at the very beginning of any design process, human values are considered. And there's empirical work with stakeholder groups trying to figure out what people actually care about, what people want in a technology, what are the competing values that people have, what are potential value conflicts, and how can these be resolved? And then how can we build in the values we actually want into the technology in the end? So I would say something like that, an improved version of that potentially.
I was wondering, I think we're gradually going into the discussion part of this evening. I was wondering, Nick Ramsey, what sort of ethical considerations have you had to deal with in developing the technology that you're working on?
Well, we've been working with medical ethicists here because we were interfering in a status quo in the sense that people with locked-in syndrome had a certain way of life, and all the people that are related to them, it's the doctors, the rehabilitation, family, they all have a certain opinion about how things should be, and then we come in and we make it complicated because we give an extra reason for people to be okay, it's less severe to be locked in. So it causes a disruption of sorts, and especially in the people around it, people that care about these persons, because now it's not that simple anymore. Now, there's an additional reason that the person wants to live. I mean, it's a whole discussion I don't want to go into about whether or not you take mechanical respiration, which is a tracheostoma. If you don't take it, you pass away. If you want to live, you take that. But it's a complicated discussion. And along the way, and it's something that I would like to kind of add to what Liddy said. Along the way, we find out, we stumble upon issues that we didn't think of beforehand. And he would have another meeting with our ethicist, involved in the study. And she wouldn't give us answers. She would say, well, these are the questions that can be raised. And that's a way of us trying to figure out how to fit in ethics as an entity. Because ethics is around us in every way. If you have an opinion about something, there is some ethics involved. But what it helped us the most with is to think through all the different ways that people could see what we were doing. And even our colleagues, they feel like, okay, but isn't it kind of weird that this person is still alive and wants to live? It interferes with how we think about things, and it was for us unpredictable at different stages of especially our work with Hanneke, how people would react around it and how we should react to their reactions. Because for us it's simple, we are trying to help someone. For other people there's a lot more implications. It does something about what we thought was human reality, and now it changes. And this discussion is going to be much bigger for ALS, because there's a lot more people that are facing the decision on whether or not to take mechanical ventilation. And it's not a simple decision, because it requires a team of 10 to 20 people to take care of you if you go through this stage. Mm-hmm. So we are mired in ethical circumstances. But somehow knowing what kind of questions people come up with makes it a little bit easier to navigate, but we don't solve things. Mm-hmm. And then maybe an extra thing, I know neurotechnology and the ethics movement, because Holland has a very big program on neurotechnology and ethics funded by the NWO, by the government, very big. And ethicists cannot stop, and they don't want to, but they cannot stop a development. Right. But they can coach it, and they can help people have an opinion about it and be able to encapsulate something in what we think is a proper life. But for instance, with BCI, like Elon Musk, let's say this thing, are we going to stop healthy people from getting one implanted? And we're not, of course, it's not going to happen. And one thing that strikes me always is, at the beginning of such a technology, we have no idea what we're talking about. We have no idea what kind of features are going to emerge. What we will find out bad things, maybe interfering with the brain makes someone live shorter, is a realistic issue. But maybe we'll discover things about ourselves that we never ever thought about.
Thank you, Nick. Lily, shortly back to you. I was wondering, do you agree with that notion that we're on a runaway train and we can't stop these developments?
I mean, I think that given the way our governments are set up right now, we probably will, it's very unlikely that we would regulate these things, the kinds of things that Elon Musk is working on, or other kinds of enhancements. I think that we have a pretty liberal approach to these kinds of things, right? So even to like the mundane kinds of enhancements that Nick was talking about earlier, right? Like using alcohol or coffee, right? We're okay with these kinds of enhancements. So it would be kind of inconsistent if we thought that just because you're using an implant or a piece of a computer or something like that, then this should be much more heavily regulated or even outlawed. So yeah, I agree with Nick that it's the technological developments are not going to stop. But in a place like the Netherlands or in the European Union, at least, we do have the opportunity to give ethical input, and also citizens have the opportunity to weigh in on the direction they want these technologies to go in. Okay.
Still, we run the risk of creating a society in which only the rich can pay for these alterations. I was wondering, Antje and Jennifer, how do you see these developments, and also particularly in view of wider societal consequences. So how class will play a role in this, and particularly within this neoliberal narrative that you just talked about, Antje.
Yeah, I think one thing that I find problematic in this discussion, or where I wish we would also concentrate more, is this idea of do we have state-funded research, neuroscientific research, or publicly financed neuroscientific research? And I have the feeling that there is more and more private money pushed into neuroscience because of specific desires, specifically also in the Silicon Valley or through these tech companies. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of big tech companies have their own neuroscientific research groups now. A lot of institutes are funded and founded, or all these neuro startup companies that are trying to get a piece of this gold rush of mm-hmm. neuro devices. And I see there kind of a problematic issue that through private money, the research goals and the research applications will definitely be influenced, and maybe also much more on application. For mm-hmm. example, what happens to fundamental research when too much of private money is influencing the direction of neuroscience.
Mm-hmm. Right, so we get this brain that wants to be paid for. Jennifer?
I think it depends on the story that we tell ourselves, as it could be something that we hoard or something that we share, and that it can go the path of all technologies and adjustment to technologies as speed and from horses to cars to trains and flying. This requires also transformations, and it started with the rich only having access, and then we all had access the moment we changed the story. So I think it all depends on what we decide as humans, mm-hmm. Where it will go, and of course costs and consequences. Mm-hmm. But I think we've always gone into the unknown with our tools, mm-hmm. Just a little bit faster right now.
Right. Just a small remark for our viewers. If you have any questions, please let us know. Then we can take the time to get those answered here live. So let us know if you have any. I was wondering, what, Lily, did you perhaps think of this when you teach the engineers at the TU in Eindhoven about what impact the technologies they are developing will have? Do you teach them about that? Are they also taking into account the sort of society they want to live in, these engineers?
Yeah, absolutely. We try to stimulate them to take that into account. So a big part of their education is focused on what we call user, society, and enterprise impacts of engineering, which it might not be the best phrase, but it really has to do with social and ethical, environmental, all of those kinds of impacts of technological developments. And I think that actually one of the most effective teaching methods is indeed to get them to think about what kind of a future society they want to live in, mm-hmm. And also to think about the ways in which technologies that are already ubiquitous have impacted them for better or worse, right? So asking them to think about, like, how has social media, like, what role does social media play in your life, for example?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel that that message really gets through to the engineers? Because you told me, yeah. Particularly when they start, they have a very positive and almost utopian idea of what technology might do.
Absolutely, yeah. I think they're very techno-optimistic. They're very technocratic at the beginning of their education, and I think it takes a while. They need to see more real-world applications as they go through their engineering career. I think sometimes that maybe the best point to introduce ethics well, it should be introduced at the beginning, but then again later, once they've had some experience, because they're quite young and they're really thinking of technologies as solutions, which is a good thing, of course.
Okay. We, in fact, have several questions from viewers, so I can't show them to you, but I can read them to you. And perhaps any of you who would like to answer them or try to answer them, that would be great. Has anybody ever already thought about upgrading animals? Would this not be a huge societal change? When they would start talking and demanding their rights.
There is a dog that talks with buttons. You can
There
follow
is a dog that talks. Right.
Yeah, she talks through her buttons. You can find it on Instagram. I don't know her name. Stella, I think. You can just look her up. Stella, I think, the dog that talks through buttons through technology. It's fascinating.
Right, and does this dog want certain rights?
She says when she's angry and when she wants to go for a walk and which toy she wants. She's really very particular, so it's quite fascinating to watch, actually, and creepy.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's and.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like if the reason it's okay for us to, for example, eat certain animals is that we think they have less cognitive capacity than us. If we were able to enhance them, then that would certainly, well, at least prima facie, would change our moral obligations towards them. Right? It would be a lot harder to eat the pig that tells you, please don't eat me.
Yes. Well, this question actually reminds me of Nick's research, of course. Nick, would your technology be applicable to animals?
Yeah. If you have an animal that knows what it wants, maybe. Most animals, well, if you take the whole range, animals are guided by more primary drives, hunger, the urge to move, the urge to reproduce. I don't know. The question would be: would you give someone with a very limited moral standard a big tool or big thing? I'm not sure. I don't know. It's a little bit too far away from me to.
Okay.
Figure out how to get there.
We have another one. What do you think about digital memory loss and the psychological effects? Digital memory loss would be humans outsourcing our memories and info to smart devices, and as a result, deterioration of our own memory system. Does this ring a bell to anyone? For anyone?
Yeah, phone numbers. I used to remember phone numbers. I don't miss not remembering them, but sometimes it's highly inconvenient.
Yeah, we're already doing this so much, right? The outsourcing.
Right.
And it seems like there's this whole idea that we already have an extended mind. So our mind actually includes the technological devices, the smartphone, the laptop, etc. And I guess it's an empirical question that we need to study whether this leads to for other things than the phone numbers, because that's pretty well established, whether this actually leads to deterioration of different kinds of skills.
Right.
And maybe for remembering mundane things, that's not really a problem. But for more profound things, say losing the ability to, I don't know, remember personal stories, or even your friend's birthday, right? Maybe that's more morally significant.
Well, can I make one remark? I think everything that regarding memory and performance, it sounds sometimes as if it's an effort that we may lose if we don't keep trying it. But I think of it completely the other way, that we are made of energy. We can't stop ourselves. Kids, they need to play. We need to do something, and that's what's brought us to where we are. Is this, insatiable curiosity and a drive to go into the unknown, and that's because we don't have to go out of our way to put effort in these things. They come to us naturally, and if we stop using it for phone numbers and for digital things, it doesn't mean that it's harmed. The energy is still there. And it will be used for other things, maybe hopefully more symbolic things. And I have no worry personally that we would lose capabilities that we regard as important.
Yes, and this is a very common perception, I think, about technology, and that it's our nature to find solutions to problems and use technology to do that. Nonetheless, I've been a bit concerned about the system that we've created, what also Lily mentioned before, the systems that we've created that are unable to hold our bad nature or our bad impulses in check. And we are indeed on a runaway train, and we don't control our environments anymore. Well, something to think about. Nonetheless, we still have another question. Take some time to get to it. This is a question for you, Jennifer. Is there a much smaller risk for psychosis when more programs like this one are organized?
I do believe that if we talk about it and know how to talk about it and know how to recognize it, we can stop the prevalence of it happening again, for instance. Mm-hmm. So, like, there has been research that shows that you can diminish the second psychosis and stop it from developing into schizophrenia. It's mm-hmm. called the Open Dialogue Project. And I think that would be the aim, to make this thing, this scary, lonely experience, to the most exciting thing that can happen to you, but you need help. You can't escape that rabbit hole alone. So that we learn how to listen to the underlying metaphorical meanings and the underlying needs that can happen in such a state. I think a lot can change, yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We're approaching, the conclusion of this evening. I'm curious, is there anything, Jennifer, that we haven't discussed that you really wanted to discuss this evening?
No, not necessarily. I'm just...
okay.
Yeah, no, from my side, there's no urgency, at the moment at least. But maybe okay. I think of this, and of course, too late again.
Right. We need an upgrade for that, mm-hmm. right? Nick Ramsey, I was wondering, what can we expect from the technological advances that you've made with your patients? Could we expect in the future, for example, that this technology would be developed for a broader use?
Your signal dropped out, but I guess the question is for me?
Yes. Yeah, you didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, no, I think it's incremental. It's like I said, we don't know what's around the corner, even if we make simple upgrades of what we have available now. And what we have available to work with patients is at least 20 years old technology, but it takes such a long time to prove that it's safe for people, so that we work with old machines. I think it's going to be a very careful incremental improvement, and that, over the years, more and more people will be interested with less severe disabilities. Let's say that we can make it work that you can actually talk, let's say 10, 20 words through a system. We may get people interested who are disabled and have a difficulty talking and find this easier. Mm-hmm. And then once it becomes an option for people with disabilities, either you get, for instance, I tore my ligament in my knee, and I had the option, either I have an external brace or I get an implant. Mm-hmm. And that kind of choice, I foresee that will be there, that people have a choice. I don't walk very straight because I had brain stroke. I'll get an implant to get it better. And I don't know when that's going to be. Medicine is extremely slow and careful, but I think that's what it will be. You choose an implant or another solution to your problem.
Right. Do you want to respond, Lily? Because no, you were okay. Thank you. Thank you, guests for joining us this evening. To my right, Jennifer Kanary, thank you very much for being here. Antye Guenther, for helping us to understand the narratives that are out there and that are coming through us through your work. Thank you, Nick Ramsey, for your interesting research, and, well, I think it's mind-blowing what you're doing. So thanks for telling us about that. And Lily Frank, thank you also for, well, sharing with us the perspective, also from Eindhoven, so close yet so far away, and the view from philosophy and ethics. Thank you, viewers. We hope to meet you next time soon. We don't have any programs planned for now. We wish you a sane next week approaching the elections in the United States, and we hope to come back to you with a short program on those elections. Thank you for watching, thank you for viewing, and we hope to see you next time. Bye.